Every chess player has lost a one game because they calculated wrong. You see the sequence and you trust the move, and 3 moves later, you realize you missed everything. That happens because you don't have a system, so you're calculating on impulse, jumping from line to line with no structure at all. In this video, I'm going to show you the 4 steps I follow every time I need to calculate a critical position. A simple process that organizes your thinking and gets you to the best move. No talent required, no rating required. And to prove that it works, I'm going to use this process live in 2 real positions from my own games. So yeah, no messing around. I'm Philip. Let's jump right in. My opponent just played queen to f1, adding more defense to f2 and g2. So what do you do now? This is where you've got to calculate. That moment where you need to go through your options to find the best move in the position. But you're not a machine, and you can't just go around calculating every single move out there. If you throw a position like this into Stockfish, it's going to calculate every single possibility. But humans don't organize their calculation that way. You've got to pick a few moves that make the most sense, and then start going deeper into them. And this step-by-step I'm going to show you now is really going to help you organize your thinking. Alright, step number 1, what I call studying the position. At this point, you're not going to calculate anything. You're just going to understand the position. This is where you're going to look for the tactical and strategic motifs in the position, especially the tactical ones, because when you talk about calculation, it's really tied to tactics, which are those immediate actions that happen on the board. So what tactical motifs can you spot in this position? Tactical motifs are things like an overloaded piece, a double attack, mating motifs, discovered attacks, or deflection, and so on. In this study of the position, you're going to try to figure out which of these motifs are there. Like there's an attacking motif on f2. It's not exactly a double attack, but the knight is really well placed on d3, and it creates threats on f2. On top of that, there are threats on g2, which could lead to mating motifs in the position. At some point, if that pawn disappears from g2, there could be queen to h3. Now, queen to h3 right away doesn't really work, but you start getting some threats on g2 tied to mating motifs. Alright, so I'm going to give you an idea to show you the tactical pattern that came to my mind when I was playing the game, because this study of the position is exactly when those tactical ideas pop into your head. The mating pattern that came to my mind was combining a queen on h3 and a knight on f3 for checkmate. That's the tactical motif of the position. This is the part in the study of the position where you spot the ideas, the tactical ideas. Maybe at this point you're looking at the position and you didn't spot any tactical ideas, and that's totally fine, okay? It just means you've got to learn more tactical motifs, and that's exactly one of the things I teach in Think Ahead, my calculation course. There, I show you how to identify those tactical motifs in the position and how to turn them into candidate moves. So that's the first step to calculating well. You've got to identify the motifs. Right, so I identified those tactical motifs in the position, especially the one tied to g2. And now, here's the second step, which is picking your candidate moves. For each motif you spotted during the study of the position, ideas are going to come up, and those ideas are going to become candidate moves, which are the options you're going to calculate. Remember, for now, you're not calculating anything yet. You're just organizing your thinking. So what are our candidates? Rook takes g2 is a move that really catches your eye, the sack on g2. Then knight takes g2 also jumps out at you. Plus, knight to f4, attacking g2 again. Notice how all of these moves are attacking moves and create immediate threats. And that ties right into our third step, which is looking for forced moves in a position. You're always going to prioritize this type of move, the move that creates a threat that forces your opponent to respond. You're not going to think about moves like f6, because f6, you're not thinking about that at all here. You're going to look for moves that threaten something like checks, or piece trades, or captures, or moves that threaten mate, or moves that threaten the piece. It's a good idea to have at least 3 candidates, and here we're going to go with knight takes g2, rook takes g2, and knight to f4. So to recap, we studied the position, we picked our candidate moves, and we prioritized the forced moves. Now we get to the fourth step, which is finally calculating the lines. Only now you actually start calculating. Going through this step by step, maybe you've already spotted some moves and ideas along the way, but now that you've got everything organized, that's when you're going to start calculating for real. When your brain gets conditioned to always do this, your calculation gets way more organized and way faster too. Which move do you calculate first? We're going to calculate the most forcing move in the position, the most direct one. If there was a move that gives check among our candidates, that would be the first one to calculate. But in this case, the most forcing move is rook takes g2. Why rook takes g2? Because it already creates the threat of queen takes h3 checkmate, threatening mate in 1. So your opponent is forced to do something after rook takes g2. Now in this calculation, it's important that you always look for your opponent's best move. After rook takes g2, what's he going to do? He's either going to take with the knight or take with the queen because there's the threat of queen takes h3 checkmate. If he plays knight takes g2, there's queen to h3, king to g1, knight to f3, checkmate. Alright, so we already know he can't take with the knight, and if he takes with the queen, well here he's already losing a lot of material. Even though there's nothing conclusive that leads all the way to checkmate, he's down a lot of material, which means black already has a winning position. And that's how this method works. Those 4 steps I told you about. Step 1, study the position. Step 2, candidate moves. Step 3, looking for forced moves in the position. And step 4, where you start calculating with the most forcing move there is. Always remembering to look for your opponent's best move. Now let's take a look at a second position I picked out where we're going to apply that same step-by-step I just showed you. This position was also against another really strong opponent, and I was playing black again. I played rook to g5 with some tactical motifs on the g-file. Plus, there's already an x-ray from the rook here on the queen. Then he played the a rook to d1, just ignoring my rook coming to g5. And that move was a serious mistake, because now there are some really strong tactical ideas in the position. So now I want you to try going through those 4 steps here with me. First, study the position. What tactical motifs are there? Well, there's this x-ray from the rook on the queen, so you can already start thinking about discovered attack ideas, like bringing the knight to e3 or to e5. These are ideas that are already starting to come up in the position. On top of that, there's a hanging bishop, and a hanging bishop is always a tactical motif, so this might be a problem in the position too. And what else? Well, those 2 points are the ones that stand out the most, the hanging bishop on b6 and the x-ray from the rook on the queen on g3. Alright, now the candidate moves. The ones that stand out the most are the moves tied to this discovered attack, like knight to e5 is a candidate move, knight to e3 is another, and knight to f2 too. Remember, for now I'm not calculating anything. Some of these moves you can rule out pretty quickly, like knight to e3 he plays queen takes e3, taking the knight and getting the queen out of there, and it's over. White is winning. But for now you're just organizing what your options are. Because a lot of the time, the player's mistake is that they see a move and just keep calculating down one line and don't see the other options. And more often than not, there's a simpler and stronger move that I end up missing. So that's why taking the time to look at your candidates is so important. Alright, so we got knight to e5, knight to e3, knight to f2. Another move I'd consider is h5, but that's already a slower move in the position. Among our candidates, which is the most forcing move, the one I'm going to start calculating? Well, it's the moves that attack the queen. And the one that stands out the most here is knight to e5, because knight to e5 on top of attacking the queen creates a threat of knight to f3 with some mating motifs in the position. The other 2 moves, knight to e3 and knight to f2, you can rule out quickly because he's always just taking with the queen. Well, what's he going to do after knight to e5? He's got to move the queen because I tapped the queen on g3, and when he moves that queen, I've got the idea of playing knight to f3 check, combined with mating motifs in the position. In the game, I played knight to e5. He played queen to f4, and now he's pretty much going to get mated by force, because I played knight to f3 check. If he plays king to h1, now there's rook to h5, and then he's getting mated. And if he plays queen takes f3, I just take on f3, and he's also getting mated, with the threat of rook takes g2 and queen to h4 coming right after. In the game, he played g3, but then after queen to e6, already with the idea of queen to h3 threatening the bishop, he had to resign, because there are 2 threats. When he moves the bishop, there's queen to h3, and there's no way to stop the mate on g2. Notice how in both of these positions, I use the same method, which is the way to organize your calculation. First step, study the position. Second step, candidate moves. Third step, look for the forcing moves in the position. And the fourth step, start calculating, always looking for the most forcing moves for you and for your opponent. Don't forget to look for your opponent's best move. Now, you can take these 4 steps and try applying them on your own in your games. Some of you guys are going to pull it off, but most of you are going to open up the board, see a complicated position, and go right back to calculating on impulse. Because knowing the method is one thing, but drilling it until it's automatic is another. That's why I created created Think Ahead, my complete calculation course. Inside, I take you from beginner to advanced, step by step, from when to calculate and when not to calculate, all the way to forced lines and advanced candidate move techniques, with full lessons and exercises for each one, until this is just how you think at the board. What I showed you today is just a fraction of what's in the course. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you're watching on your TV, point your phone camera at the QR code on the screen. Alright, and with that, we're getting to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed and learned something new, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.